When did they pick it up? Was it at 4 o'clock in the morning?
How do you know?
No, we tapped it.
Likkutei Sichot, volume 2, Parshas Rei.
So
What?
happens at 11 in the morning?
Yeah. I think, that's when I wake up anyway. Well, maybe an hour earlier. Section 10. Well, section 9. אף בחודש אלול כן. העובדה שקדוש ברוך הוא מופיע לפני כל אחד מבלי להתחשב מצבו ומגלה לו פנים שחקות, יש בה יתרון גדול בכך שכל יהודי מסוגל לקלוט אלוקות. So the fact that in Elul, Hashem appears to every Jew, regardless of his status, regardless of his state, in terms of mitzvahs, in terms of Torah, in terms of anything, it has a great advantage because it means that every Jew can pick up on godliness. And we admit all the time that the biggest problem that we have in this world is that we see light, we hear sounds, but we don't sense godliness. We don't have a direct sense that can do that. And I talked about this, I think, many times now with you. Maybe I haven't talked about this with you. The Baal Shem Tov says, he asks this question about a Gemara. It says in the future a woman is going to take a pot and go to different academies of Talmud and ask them, is this pot kosher or treif? And they won't know what to answer. And then it says that, because this is based on the verse, Atidat Torah shetishtokach miYisrael, that in the future Torah will be forgotten. You have to remember this was written, Atidat Torah shetishtokach miYisrael, this idea is about 2,500 years old. And then in the future Torah will be forgotten. So what did they mean then? They meant that the Torah that we have now, 2,500 years ago, will be forgotten. What was the Torah that they had then? So they gave this example. So for many generations, I don't think this example was fully understood, or was understood in ways that don't fully make sense. It says about Baal Shem Tov, and then the Gemara says, and who will restore the Torah, or who will make sure that it's not forgotten in the first place? That's Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. That's where that's really the source for Rashbi being the communicator of Pnimius Torah, of the inner teachings of the Torah, because of the inner teachings of the Torah won't be forgotten. So says the Baal Shem Tov, what's wrong with this story? What's wrong with the story is that she's walking around with a pot. Because who cares? Who cares about the pot? Right? If you want to know if something's treif or not, I don't need to see the pot. It doesn't help me to see the pot. I need to know what you put inside, and I need to know what happened. But she's very sincere and earnest in her understanding. She says, if something is treif, I should be able to bring it to a wise person, to a scholar, and he'll look at it and he'll tell me if she doesn't understand this whole thing. Why is it all these calculations? Was there 60? What's that got to do with anything? You look at the pot, you tell me if it's treif or not. So it says about Shem Tov, that was the Torah that was deemed to be forgotten. Because when the Torah was given, it just says that there's such a thing called Tumah and Tahara. There is such a thing as something being sacred and something being profane. There's such a thing as something being permissible and impermissible. There's something as being treif and not treif and kosher. It was clear to them what this is. How could it be that it was clear to them? Moshe Rabbeinu didn't explain the laws of how you calculate it. These laws were only explained 1,000 years later, or 1,500 years later even, because they saw it. They sensed it. There wasn't a question. You told them, this is this and this is that, and that was it. Because they knew. You didn't have to explain it. If they needed to explain it in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, it would have been written in the Torah. But it doesn't say any of these things in the Torah. These are all developments from the time of the sages. So you can do one or two things. You can say what the academics say. Everybody who is certain that they understand history better than what the Torah says was going on. And then you come and say, no, this whole thing was invented sometime in around the 200, 100 BCE, and then around the turn of the first millennium, year 1. That's pretty much when they invented it. Or you can come and say, they didn't invent it, but they had to give language, logical language, to something that people were seeing before. Why? Because they were slowly not seeing it. So you said Tuma and Tahara, and something is ritually pure or ritually impure. They didn't understand what you wanted anymore. There was this shift suddenly. They didn't understand. They see these generations are lessening in the sense that they have less and less of a sense of godliness. They have less and less of a sense of spiritual reality. They don't see it anymore. So because they don't see it, you have to but you have to give a language that is rational, that is logical, that they can follow. And that's the beginning of Torah Shebaal Peh. That's really what Torah Shebaal Peh does. Torah Shebaal Peh tells you how to explain to someone who doesn't see what colors are. In this case, what ritually impure and impure is, what treif and kosher is. That's the way the Baal Shem Tov says. So what's with us? We don't see these things. So we need to learn a pile of books to explain to us what the logical process is, and then we can mimic, using our logic, what they saw anyway, using their senses. And that's the big shift that happened sometime around the time of the Second Temple period. They came back and something was missing. So we don't sense godliness. But in Elul, there's a little bit more sensitivity. אך דווקא משום יתרון זה יש צורך בזהירות יתר לא להתאפס לטעות שאפשר להישאר במצב הזה. הוכחה לכך, העובדה שאמרות שהאדם נתון בעובדין דחול, למתת מלאכות, ניתן לו מלמעלה התגלות 13 מידות הרחמים. So the idea is that in spite of the fact that we are a little bit more sensitive, or godliness is revealing itself a little bit more, you should still be wary, you should be still careful not to feel that because of this, you can stay in a mundane state. You don't have to do anything to elevate your consciousness. It says, what does it mean that godliness is revealed a little bit more? It means that we have the 13 principles of mercy. That a person feels during the month of Elul, he feels that there's more compassion on him from heaven. He feels that. And as it says, how did Moshe Rabbeinu sense this? When Moshe Rabbeinu was on the mountain and the 13 principles of compassion were revealed to him, what did he see? So the sages say it looked like this. Melamed, the Gemara says, Melamed shenitatef HaKadosh Baruch Hu kashatz k'shliach tzibur, vayavor Hashem al panav vayikra Hashem Hashem, shemukran b'shem havaya shelemala min ha'ishtalshelut. So he says he saw as if God was donning himself, enveloping himself in a talis, and he was standing like he's a shliach tzibur, like he's leading the tefillah, the davening. And then he said Hashem Hashem, and then he said Havaya Havaya. And these two names of God, they come from the godliness that is before creation, before the Seder Ishtalshelus, before there's a limiting of reality to the way that it is now, and the inability to sense godliness. That's part of what the contraction did. That's a part of what happened. So these two Havayot, you have more of a sense of godliness in the world. נאמר בפרי עץ חיים, it says in פרי עץ חיים, שהמילים להוויה ויאמרו לאמור עשירה, right? These four words from Shirat Hayam, from the Song of the Sea, Song at the Sea, to Havaya, and they said, saying, we will sing, I will sing. V'rashei tevot Elul. So the initials are Elul. There's a big Sicha of the Rebbe about these four words. Very interesting Sicha in volume 31. What's the connection between the Song at the Sea, especially this verse, which was the initial verse that started the whole Song at the Sea, and Elul? Why do the initials spell Elul? Ma perush hamila leimor. Why did it say leimor? Leimor means to say. So they said to say. the whole Sichot there is on this word Lemol. But here he gives it, I guess in short, he gives something. Everywhere else where it says to say, means that you're going to say this to someone else. So they said to say. What do you mean they said to say? They're saying it to themselves. What do they mean to say? Since all the Jewish people were there at the sea, who were they going to say this to? They were the only ones there. This was, they said this to the future generations. And what we mean by they said this to the future generations is that every generation should remember the beginning of the song. I will sing to Hashem because He has elevated Himself above all those who are prideful. When a Jew feels that he is singing to Hashem, then he feels ga'oga, then he feels that God elevates Himself above all those who are prideful. אף שישנם גיאותניה הם השרים שלמעלה, הנהגת הטבע על פי סדר השתלשלות. הרי כשיהודי מוסר עצמו לקדוש ברוך הוא, מבטל הקדוש ברוך הוא לפניו את כל העולם, והשרים, הכל נתון תחתיו. So, who are these who have pride? He says the ones who have pride are the ministering angels above. What do? They run the world. They are the forces of nature. And so when you say, I feel that Hashem is singing, or I'm singing to God, I feel that He's above everything, what happens is that you find out that Hashem is above all the forces of nature. That's what you see. That's what it means that He has pride above those who are prideful. This is the work that we have, the toil, the spiritual toil of the month of Elul. To say, Ashir ala Hashem. To say to ourselves even, that I am going to sing to Hashem. התמסרות אל הקדוש ברוך הוא שהיא תשובה. Committing ourselves to God, which is the meaning of tshuva. ורוח תשוב אל האלוקים, and the spirit returns to God. And מכאן נובע גם הלך רוח של השירה. When you feel that your spirit is going back to God, then you have a sense of I will sing. הצד של התמסרות לקדוש ברוך הוא משפיע גם על יהודי נוסף, ויאמרו לאמור. And you have to add that if you're going to sing, meaning that you're going to dedicate yourself, commit yourself to godliness, this will also affect another Jew. And that's another meaning of leimol today in our generation. That not everybody says Shirat Hayam every day. Not everybody saying Ashir al Hashem ki goga every day. But if I'm saying it, vayomru leimol, so it's I'm feeling and I'm intending that it have an effect on other Jews as well. Ve'amira ledorot. And it's also for the coming generations. And then you yourself become a master over the world, over nature. Eved melech melech, because you're the servant of a king, and you've committed yourself to the king, you've dedicated yourself to his service, then you too, says the Gemara in Shavuos, are a king. Eved la'Hashem malach ge'ut lavesh. You become the servant of God who is above all those who are prideful. And again, that makes you a master of nature. That nature will now bend itself based on what you need. So that's also the inyan of Elul. So I'm looking forward to Elul, and that nature should bend for me. What can I say? I need it to bend. Not a lot, just a little. Feels just a little.